Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Maggie Anderson, and I am the Arts and Education Director at the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. Today, you're joining us to get a first look at the newly restructured Project Grants in Education. And I'd like to begin our session this morning with a land acknowledgement. So we want to acknowledge that as we gather virtually, the RISCA offices are on the traditional lands of the Narragansett and East Niantic people, and past and present, and RISCA honors with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout our history. Oh, thank you for the comments. So as I mentioned, we're about to walk through this new grant program, and there's a small enough group of us here today that we're going to just do this informally. I'm going to present the new information, and as questions occur to you, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And then at the end of our time together, we'll just all come off mic and ask questions that may have come up for you. If the group remains small like this, I'm happy to answer specific questions. But if our group gets a little bit bigger, I will encourage you to message me and we can arrange a time to talk through your specific grant application if you're interested in pursuing this funding. So, Project Grants in Education. This began in January of 2022. My colleagues who are on the call with me today, Molly Flanagan and Todd Trebor, actually reimagined their grant processes in 2021. And so Project Grants in Education and Project Grants in Healthcare followed in their steps. And we did that work between January and June of this year. The members of the community were invited to serve on a working group, and the working group met about 4 times and completely and totally dissected the previous funding model and looked at what other state arts agencies and what other education funders were doing that was really successful in helping deep enriching arts projects get funded. We had some specific goals going through this process. We wanted to bring the Rhode Island State Council's education granting into alignment with the new strategic plan from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, current and emerging best practices in arts education funding. We wanted to look at what other state arts agencies were doing, and we specifically wanted to look at how RIDE was funding schools and schools districts. And we wanted to look at the needs of the arts education community in Rhode Island. Another thing that was really important to the team was lowering the barriers to application. We know that it's traditionally individual teaching artists or classroom teachers who are filling out these grant applications, and we wanted to make that a simpler and more straightforward process. We also wanted to help Project Grants in Education feel like they had to be in the more competitive categories of, say, project grants for organizations, so that we could spread our dollars a little bit further as an agency. And then it was critical that through the whole process, we directly engage teaching artists and educators into the ideation process and make sure that this was going to result in participatory grant making. So that's sort of the background. Oh, going too fast. So some things that are the same. If you've applied for Project Grants in Education before, you can still be an individual applicant or a school or organization. If you're an individual, you can still apply for a maximum of $3,000 to fund your project. And if you're a school or organization, you can still apply for up to $10,000. The application deadlines are also still the same. One big change to note is that in this funding cycle, so specifically for the October 3rd deadline, there is a single grant portal. It does not matter if you are an individual or an organization or school. You will use the RISCA organizations portal to apply for this grant. It's really, really, really important to note that this is only for Project Grants in Education. We definitely have grants for individuals that are still in our individuals portal and currently open. But if you are an individual interested in an education grant, you're going to go to the organizations portal. So what's new? Here's our new description. We have this really great header, which says that arts education helps students discover, develop, and create a rich context for learning while deepening engagement. So that's the overall goal of this program. So what does the grant do specifically? It's project support to schools, nonprofit organizations, arts educators, or teaching artists who are engaging students in rich and meaningful artistic experiences in a dedicated learning environment. We're going to talk about this some more because this is really important terminology. We've expanded outside of just schools. So we're talking about dedicated learning environments. Project grants and education projects must be experiential and focus on the exploration of art and the artistic process. That's a bit of a change because we are no longer funding what we refer to as arts exposure. So that would be assemblies, fairs or festivals, or having a different group of presenters come into the students. The students have to be engaged in the art making process for these projects. These grants also strive to build capacity of local teaching artists and nonprofit organizations while providing students with high quality artistic learning experiences. We are explicit when we say that project grants in education are not intended to substitute a school's art education program. That's really important to us. Who can apply? So as always, schools can apply. They can be public charter, private, alternative, a state school, career and tech center. New this year, a nonprofit organization can be the applicant for a project grant in education, and we'll talk a lot about that. And then, as always, arts educators or teaching artists, as long as they're in partnership with the school. Okay, what else is new? We've boiled down what a project grant in education is to 3 main project requirements. The first is that there is a drafted lesson plan with clearly stated learning goals or outcomes and a means for evaluation. I know this sounds really big and formal, but it's actually a huge refocus of what the original requirements were. We used to ask for this in a much more detailed way, and then we also were the ones telling you which metrics for measuring successful outcomes you had to use. We've reframed that. So now all we're looking for is a lesson plan instead of a complete curriculum and clearly stated learning goals that you tell us what those are for your art making students. You can tell us what your intended outcomes are, and you can tell us how you're going to evaluate that. So there are no longer, we assume because this is arts and arts making in an education setting, that there'll be some connection to the National Core Art Standards or some standardized measurement like that, but we're not making you tell us which NCAS standards you're going to hit in your after school learning program. So this is really about you framing what the lessons and the learning looks like. You may recall that we used to ask for a minimum of 10 visits, 10 unique visits between the same teaching artist and the group of students, but we never said like how long those 10 visits had to amount to. And so we've arrived at a minimum of 8 contact hours between the same teaching artist or artists and a distinct group of learners. This is another important definition that we're going to talk a lot more about because this is no longer just for school age students. Your distinct group of learners can be learners of any age. The only thing that we said about the contact sessions is that they must occur on separate days. So 1 8-hour day does not meet the requirement. And the third criteria is that there must be in-depth, sequential, and participatory learning opportunities incorporating 1 or more art forms. That's a change again from what we refer to as arts exposure. So it simply means that the students should be learning something from the teaching artist or the arts organization, and they should be putting that learning into art making of their own. Further project requirements, if it's a school who is the applicant, it can be the school or the district. If it's a community-based learning project, the nonprofit organization must be the applicant. If you are an individual, you have to come in with a partner letter from a school. So one thing to think about is you cannot be an individual applying to do something in education at a community-based organization. You can be a community-based organization applying for an arts education project. But if you're going to apply as an individual teaching artist, you have to be in partnership with a school. The question in the chat is if you a nonprofit organization that serves a specific school district, a nonprofit organization can be the applicant in that case. The individual teaching artist would either have to come in with the specific district as their partner, leaving out the nonprofit organization, or the nonprofit organization would have to be the applicant. Okay, no problem. So this is a good point to stop, because some of us on the call used to be applicants for AAG, Arts Access Grants, and perhaps you were considering coming in for a PGO, which is a project grants to organization. You may have received an email from my colleague Todd, who's here on the call with us, and we are encouraging some former Arts Access Grant applicants to consider being PGE applicants, because there's more funding available, right? You can ask for up to $10,000 for your project to support it, and it's not as competitive as a category. So in order to figure out if you should be a project grant to organization or a project grant in education, you should ask yourself about these 3 criteria. Does your work meet the project requirements that I just outlined? And then take a look at these 2 specific terms that I've already mentioned. Is the work happening in a dedicated learning environment? And the definition of a dedicated learning environment is the physical space where the project will occur, typically a pre-K through 12 school building or an arts and culture organization. Technical settings and space for distance learning activities would be considered a dedicated learning environment as well. So a library, a boys and girls club, excuse me, I have to, sorry. A library, a boys and girls club, these would all be considered dedicated learning environments. A distinct group of learners is a pre-identified cohort of student participants of any age that remains stable through the duration of the arts learning project. So for the 8 contact hours, the students have to be the same. A typical model that we see here where there could be some confusion is, say we're at the Boys and Girls Club and there's after school programming and arts education. Would that qualify looking at 1 and 2? Yes. Looking at 3, the difference would be if it's a drop-in program, it's not going to qualify for PGE. But if you have a way to have the same students attend, then yes, it could be a project grant in education. Todd and I are facilitating a second webinar for organizations to help them determine which category to apply in. That is happening. Todd, you want to put the date in the chat maybe? But that's coming up soon. And so if you still have questions about could I be a project grant in education, that would be a great second webinar for you to attend if you can. Okay. Also new, we have reframed the program priorities. So you are going to apply for a project grant in education. You meet all of the requirements and criteria. Here's what you should know about what we're going to look to fund. Yeah, sorry, losing my words. So we are still going to prioritize in-school projects. We are going to prioritize projects that authentically match students and school populations with teaching artists from a shared cultural background and experience. We're hoping to encourage schools to look to the immediate community and certainly the cultural majorities in their community when they're reaching out to have arts learning projects happen. And we're going to prioritize projects that center various types of learners. So we have learners of varying academic abilities, learners in non-traditional academic programs, learners of ALAND diasporas, and learners of economically disadvantaged status as defined by the Rhode Island Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. You do not have to be these things to apply. We just want to be upfront that when we're evaluating, we're prioritizing projects that meet these additional criteria, because these criteria are in line with RISCA's strategic plan and the arts education funding aspirations of the National Endowment for the Arts. Okay, any questions about requirements or priorities? I'm just reading the two. Okay. So would programming for a homogenous community that aims to bring in experiential arts and culture programming that reflects the global majority still be considered? Absolutely. Absolutely. And then would it be advantageous to link goals to the Rhode Island state curricula? Certainly, if it's a school-based program, that would be absolutely important. And there are links to the National Core Art Standards, which are the state's arts education standards in the application documents. So those are, and all of the application documents are already available on our website. Okay. Here's a fun exercise for us to go through together. So also new are the match requirements. In keeping with the project grants to organizations and the grants to individual artists, if you are asking for $3,000 or less, and if you are an individual, that's the most you can ask for, it's 3. But if you're an organization that's asking for $3,000 or less, you do not have to have matching dollars. You also do not have to have matching dollars if you are applying for a pilot program. And we're going to define a pilot program as the first or second year of the program. So the first year is the getting it up. You come to RISCA for money to get it off the ground. We have this great idea. We're going to work with this artist to come in and serve our students after school. That's year 1. Year 2, you come back to RISCA and say, we're going to apply for funds to continue this pilot work. This is going to be our evaluation year. When we make sure that everything's going well, we're going to see what we have to retweak, so on and so forth. You also do not have to have matching funds if you are a school or a nonprofit organization meeting free or reduced lunch criteria or state identified need criteria. For those of us on the call right now from schools, this looks really familiar to you. This definition right here is right out of all of the RIDE granting paperwork. We are taking this from the Rhode Island Department of Education, right? So a free or reduced price lunch school, which is typically linked with Title I status, or a school that has a 1 or 2 star rating on the RIDE report card, or a district under state control at the time of application. There would not be a match required, okay? So that's awesome, because that's going to be a lot of us on the call here. There are instances when a match is required. So I'd like to take an opportunity to walk you through some examples, okay? So for my example, we're going to be looking at a stop motion animation project that's happening after school, okay? In example 1, the actual teaching artist, the media artist themselves, is applying to RISCA for a project grant in education to do a stop motion animation class with students after school. This individual media artist can apply for a maximum of $3,000, and there are no circumstances in which this applicant would have to show a match. All right. And the second example, this is a middle school that's piloting a stop motion animation project for their 7th grade social studies curriculum. They can ask for up to $10,000, and they do not have to have matching dollars because it's a pilot. It's either the first or second year of this program. In the third example, this school is Bain Middle School in Cranston, and they are continuing the project in number 2. So they've had a very successful 2 pilot years. It's now a permanent part of their curriculum. And they are looking for funds to continue the stop motion animation project that happens after school for these 7th graders as a continuation of their social studies curriculum, working with the teaching artist. They can also ask for up to $10,000, but they meet the state definition of need as a Title I school with a high free and reduced lunch population, so they would not have to show a match. However, if it was Barrington Middle School doing the same project, it's no longer their pilot year, they're doing the work in year 3, they can ask for up to $10,000. If they only want $3,000, then they don't have to worry about a match. But say they're going to ask us for the full 10. Now they have to match every dollar over $3,001, right? So basically what that boils down to is they're going to ask us for 10, but then they have to have $7,000 in matching funds that they are bringing here to the project, okay? So I'm just going to pause from this stop share and show you the budget. And then we're going to talk about this in detail. Nobody worry. Okay. So here's the new budget form for this, okay? 75% of the time, you are only going to be filling out this top part here, the project expenses, because 75% of the time with this application, you are not going to have to show a match. If I'm, excuse me, if I'm the fourth example, if I'm Barrington Middle School and I'm asking for $10,000 and I have to show that I have at least 7 that I can bring to this project, all of these categories listed here are expenses that could count as cash match income. So, for example, the easiest way to talk about this, in my opinion, when the school's an applicant, when the school is an applicant, right, is that staff salaries. So this isn't, you'll recall that this project, even though it's happening after school, it's an extension of the social studies curriculum during the day. Therefore, the staff salaries of your 7th grade social studies teacher would go here, you know, like, let's just pretend that in this world, we pay that person $7,000. So sorry, I wrote it. I'm supposed to write it over here. It would be great to know how to use my own template. So I don't even have to worry about my match. Yes, I have to show my match, but because I'm a school and there are comparable operational dollars being spent towards this project, it's going to be okay. And I'm going to have that match. If you are a school or a nonprofit organization that is going to have to show a match, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you make an appointment to meet with me and I can walk you through your budget template. All right, I'm going to take a pause here and I'm going to look at some of the questions in the chat. Okay. So we answered that, we answered that, we answered that. The language for free and reduced lunch criteria for nonprofit organizations would come into play when you're talking about the students that you're going to serve. So in your application, when you tell us who your distinct group of learners are, if they're students who, if they just happen to be all Bain Middle School students, then that criteria carries over. That's how you would do it. So for a nonprofit organization, you have to first determine who your distinct group of learners is. That's how you would do that. What if it is for a district pilot? Should you apply individually by school? So if it's a pilot year, you don't have to worry about it. The district can apply, and that would probably look really strong in a panel to have the whole district supporting it. And then as you move into year 3, you should shift into looking to the individual schools to be the applicant. That would be my answer there. Any other questions about the budget? Okay. All right. So next we have what the new evaluation looks like. So if you've applied in the past, you'll remember that artistic merit was 50% of your score. Curriculum connection was 25%. And I'm going to totally forget the third criteria. Wow. That's terrible. And I apologize. And this is recorded, so now this will live in infamy. All that to say that unfortunately, artistic merit was really skewing the scales. And it wasn't really about evaluating the arts education that was happening. So we've created a completely different rubric. So now the grant applications will be evaluated on the following criteria, and they're all worth 25%. So project fit, do the goals and activities, again, that you've framed, that you've provided to us, clearly fit the project grant and education category description? Are the outcomes or the results of the project clearly stated and correlated with the project's goals? Does implementation make sense, right? Is there a clear definition of success and metrics to measure that success? And then what do the partnerships and collaborations look like? Instead of artistic merit being 50% of the total score, now we're looking at artistic merit we're going to ask that it's present in all 4 criteria. And the way that we're going to do that is, is it high quality arts making that the students are doing themselves? Is their standard-based learning, and is their cultural competencies, right? Like, who are these teaching artists, and are they really connecting with a distinct group of learners? And are they bringing their passion for their art making to the students? Is that translating? We're going to look for that across all 4. And then when it comes time to allocate funds, that's where the program priorities come back into play, right? So everyone's going to get scored on this really great, clear, and a model that I think makes really great sense. And then when we rank and score and start to give out the money, then we're going to fall back on the program priorities, and we're going to say, okay, was this project scored really high? And also, this project is working with a non-traditional group of students. This project took care in choosing a teaching artist that reflects the students and their distinct group of learners. And this project was school-based. Again, school-based is not a required criteria, but it is a funding priority, and that comes all the way down from the National Endowment for the Arts. Let's see, I have one more question here. Our org typically recruits mostly or entirely low-income students of color for our programs. Would we need to document this in some way in order to meet? Yes, you would need to have some sort of documentation that shows that like 90% of the participants meet this criteria. You don't have to get specific to you don't have to get to student level with names or addresses or anything like that, but you would need to think about a way you could write that up in your application to express that. Because when you apply and you are submitting your support documents, there will be something that you have to upload that says, I'm applying for a match waiver. And if you're applying for a match waiver because it's a pilot program, that's one thing. But if you're applying for a match waiver because you meet the state need criteria, you are going to have to upload some sort of document that shows that. And we put a link to where you could find it, some resources on the RIDE website to help with that. Okay, so other changes in the application process. The guideline format is very different, less scary, a lot less legalese, and a lot less formal. And I'm going to take a second to show you that. So this is the new guidelines for project grants in education. Because most of us are in-class educators or working our butts off in community-based organizations, everything you need to know is on the front page. If the front page doesn't seem like a good fit, you don't even have to read through. Then we have a table of contents for you. So like, okay, this is me. I'm this, and this is what I want to do. I'm in the right place. Here's everything you need to know. If you don't have the time to read through the whole guidelines in one setting, all right, let me look at the application checklist today. Let me remind myself about the review process, right? So you're just going to go ahead and use what you need. Here's all the information. It's all bulleted. Here's our priorities, our requirements. So now we get to the application questions, which we're going to go through in a second. The application online is going to start with an eligibility quiz. These are all branching questions. There are, I believe, 9 questions. After you take this eligibility quiz, you're going to know right away whether or not you should proceed with the rest of the application. It will tell you in 2 minutes whether or not you're eligible and if you should move forward. Then you'll have information about the project lead profile. This is really important for everyone on the call. If you've applied in the past, we are no longer using DUNS numbers, DUNS numbers. Everyone is required to have a SAM UEI number. Again, for those of us on the call from schools, the good news is that your school or your district also needs to have a SAM UEI number for the money that they're getting from federal ed. So all of their entitlement money. This is not just us. So your business office or your grants officer in your district should already have your SAM UEI number, but this is huge. You have to have this. And even if you're not coming in at the October deadline, and you should apply for one now, because there is a huge backup with SAM.gov with people applying for their SAM UEI numbers. This is free. Please, 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 you may Google SAM UEI and see websites where people are offering to like pay to get you you pay them to get your SAM-UI number. This is free. This should not cost anything. Please don't spend money on this process. All right, so then back to the application, you'd give your project overview, you'd give your narrative, and then, so this is it. These are the only sections with the open response: project overview and project narrative. Everything else is an upload, a support document. If you're going to use a fiscal sponsor, you could upload that. If you're going to apply for the match waiver, you're going to upload your documentation. Your project budget must be the RISCA template that we just used, or that I just showed you. So you're going to upload that. You no longer have to like write a budget, answer, and narrative, and then upload your budget. You're just uploading your template. Your example lesson plan in whatever format that looks like at your organization. We'd still need to see the resume or CV of any teaching artists involved. If you are an individual applicant, this is where you're going to have to put your letter of support from the school district, but also here you can put any other support letters, artistic work samples, and then anything else that you think we need to see. So we've really made this about going through this process and helping you be as successful as you can. This is what you have to tell us. This is what you have to craft and create, but everything else you can just show us, which we're really excited about. So you go through all of this, you decide that this is for you, and then this is just a checklist to make sure you've got everything done. You're going to want to absolutely make sure that you are hitting submit. This is due at 11:59 p.m. on October 3rd, because October 1st is a Saturday. But I cannot help you if you're at checkbox 1 on the morning of October 3rd. So we really encourage you to use this checklist as a way to pace yourself through the application process as well. Here you'll see the evaluation criteria and all you need to know about the review process. It's important to remember that with all RISCA grant processes, the applicants and the evaluators get the exact same materials. So what we're walking you through right now is the exact same document we'll use to train the panelists who will review the application. And then you're going to want to check out our FAQ, which is we put a lot of time and effort into answering as many questions as we possibly could. Where can I find my cash match? The question that was asked earlier about like, can you link to some standards that we could use for outcomes right here? That's going to be all of that. What is my SAM-UI? And then this is the glossary. So all these terms that are specific to this new grant category. So for example, what's a dedicated learning environment? What's a distinct group of learners? Any questions on that? Okay, I'm looking back up at some questions.
Yeah, there are definitely questions in the chat, Maggie.
All right, let's go ahead and look at them. Okay, so answer that one, answer that one, answer that one, answer that one, answer that one. Okay, Jill, I see that Molly answered for me. Thank you. Yes, this is being recorded and we will share it. So would a targeted group of middle schoolers who are identified by a school as at risk with mental health qualify? So they certainly would be a non-traditional group of learners, and a project with those students could be considered a funding priority. They would not qualify for a match waiver though, because that's about the financial economic side of the distinct group of learners. Awesome. Okay. Alma, that would be in the FAQ section. Any nonprofit organizations looking for models or templates for what lesson plans and outcomes could look like, that's in the FAQ section. That's those links there. All right. So next, I just really quickly want to show you the question list. So when you log into the organizations portal, you'll look for Project Grants in Education, FY23 C2, which stands for Cycle 2. This is the same from our guidelines document. This is just reminding you what you're about to get into. And all the, another link back to the guidelines document, reminding you that you'll need to use the RISCA PGE budget template, the evaluation rubric if you need it. And then again, if you are an organization who's going to use a fiscal sponsor, a sample letter for fiscal sponsorship. And then, as I mentioned, you're gonna run through this applicant eligibility, right? So first and foremost, are you a unit of local or municipal government, such as a school district? Are you a school? Are you a nonprofit organization? Are you an individual artist or teaching artist? If you are not one of these four things, this is not the category for you. Are you asking for more than $3,000? If yes, then you're going to automatically be kicked down here to the question that says, if you are requesting more than $3,000 in project support, do you have a one-on-one cash match for all expenses over $3,000? So your choices would be, yes, I do. No, I don't. I'm applying for my match waiver because it's a pilot. I'm applying for my match waiver because I meet the free and reduced lunch criteria. All right. If you are applying for a project and you know you will have to have a match, but for some reason you don't have it, then you can still ask for up to $3,000 without having to have a match. Anybody can ask for up to $3,000 without any special criteria needed to not have to show the match. You will be asked if your sites are fully accessible. If they are not, this is not the grant program for you. In fact, none of the RISCA grant programs are for you. That's a funding requirement for RISCA funding. If you are an organization only, do you have your SAM UEI number? You're going to say yes, no, or I'm an individual. Again, most people on this call, your school's business office should have that. And then we're going to ask you if you want money to do any of these things. If you do, you are not eligible for this because we are not legally allowed to fund any of these activities. If you come in as a nonprofit organization, do you have a dedicated learning environment? And do you have your partnership letter? And if you come in as an individual, oh, I just noticed something, but this is if you are an individual. Do you have a dedicated learning environment and partnership letter? We'll have to make that change. And then if you're an organization, are you in a dedicated learning environment with a distinct group of learners? So apologies on that. That's a typo on our end, but we'll get that corrected immediately. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here. And our group did get a little bit bigger. So let's although no, it looks pretty good. So why don't we go ahead and just see if people have big questions about the program itself, maybe not your specific application, but big questions about the program itself. And you can just go ahead and unmute. And I see a hand up from Marley. No, I don't. That's, I'm sorry, that's my cursor on Marley. Any big questions? Okay. All right, then maybe any specific questions? Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to give it a minute. I'm also going to put my email here in the chat. The best way to know if this is a fit for you is for you to drop me a message and just arrange a 15 to 20 minute meeting where we can talk through your project specifically. It's important to remember that nobody on staff at the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts has anything to do with the decision-making process. It's our job to help you apply and submit the best application that you possibly can. So even if you start a draft, we can log in on the back end, take a look at it, let you know how things are looking. I will absolutely send this slideshow. It will likely be available as a resource on our resource page, but we can also see about emailing the link out for this recording. But please reach out. Okay. My colleagues, have I missed anything that I should share with these guys? Should I just put Beyonce back on?
join the Facebook resource groups,
Awesome.
and there's lots of help if you need it. And Maggie's the best. And Emma is also the best.
Thank you very much for that. But Molly and Todd are also the best. I will drop the links for the Facebook groups right now. Happy to do that. I am also going to